the feature.
There's a lot of kids who are
Yep.
going with family.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
on the speaker.
Yeah, I mean, people
Encouraging,
have own
right?
family or invested.
Expected.
Are we waiting for anybody else, or is this
I think
it?
this is everybody.
Probably,
Yeah,
This is it?
And they have to come get that. Weird.
Okay.
Wow.
Hey, Dr. K. We're fully assembled, right?
Yeah.
Is that everyone? Cool.
So I was the last one.
Are we live?
Yes, we are.
Great.
Alright, we are
We got
live.
sound, we're everything, we're good?
We have pulse,
Perfect.
we're living.
I am a lot, as long as I know,
Yeah.
I mean, depends.
Well,
What
and
year
Dr.
is it?
K, before you arrived, they did decide they were gonna do it in Italian instead of English.
Oh, cool, that's good.
Yeah.
I was hoping that would be.
Yeah.
In which dialect? I prefer Sicilian
Oh.
dialect.
There we
It's
go.
the only one I can.
Parli sicuro.
Yeah, that's it.
Piedmont, we're going Piedmont. All right, I guess without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our second prescribed title talk of the 2021-2022 IB exams. Today's topic reads, to what extent do you agree with the claim that there's a world of difference between truth and facts? A quote from Maya Angelou. And answer with reference to two areas of knowledge. Before we jump into the question, if our panelists could briefly introduce themselves. I am Andrew Snoda, TOK teacher here at EF Academy, and I will be moderating and probably not talking very much in our discussion. We'll start from the right.
I go first, okay. So I'm Isabella Zangerami, I'm an 11th grader, and that's mostly it. I take TOK as many students, like all of them.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to look at the camera. I'm,
What camera?
I'm Vladimir Kuskovsky, and I am witnessing TOK happening here. And I'm the head of school, I guess.
I'm Giovanni Villari. I am a IB theater and IB Italian literature teacher. I have taught TOK in the past, and I do many other things revolving around theater and stuff.
I'm Maricia Sterzi, and I'm an IB senior here at EF Academy, and I take TOK, just like Isabel.
Thank you. Our goal today really is just to discuss the question and hopefully provide context and examples for the students who will be writing about this topic, should they choose to do so for TOK this year. Hopefully we will just have a discussion and try and arrive at some different conclusions about the question, not necessarily here to debate or argue that one answer is better than the other, only that there are multiple interpretations and answers to the question. I'm going to start off with a very straightforward question in honor of one of my colleagues, Mr. Goldsberry, who would usually start a discussion like this with, to what extent do you agree in kind of a two-word answer? Do you mostly agree? Do you somewhat agree? Do you somewhat disagree? Or do you mostly disagree? We could start with Dr. K and kind of just go by. No need to kind of qualify your answer at this point. We can come back and do that later. But I do want to hear kind of which of those four you would say for this question initially. Do you mostly agree, somewhat disagree, mostly disagree?
Somewhat agree.
I somewhat disagree.
It depends. I hate to have to do this, but it
Not
really
helpful.
depends. I mean, if I have to choose,
You must.
I must.
Or else.
Then I mostly agree.
I think at the moment I somewhat disagree. Somewhat agree, sorry.
Oh yeah, nice.
Okay.
So we're on the gamut.
Yeah, nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are a number of things that we can kind of get out of the way with this question at first. Since we're not necessarily defining these terms on our own, we're trying to decipher what Maya Angelou's definitions for these terms are.
Mm-hmm.
We can kind of dispose with trying to figure out what we would describe as truth and facts and a world of difference. So we kind of need to figure out kind of what she thinks of those definitions. So I guess my first question is pretty straightforward. What exactly do you think that she is trying to say with this quote? What do you think she would say proves that there is a world of difference between facts and truth? What does she mean when she says facts? What does she mean when she says truth? And what does she mean when she says a world of difference? So I guess I'm looking for what you think her definitions are.
I'll take a stab. I I think, a word of difference means that the two things could not be more dissimilar, is the greatest possible difference. And I think the idea and the way that I sort of read this quote from her and think of what she must sort of mean is that truth is something bigger, something that goes beyond the quotidian, that goes beyond the tangible even. Facts are facts. They're tangible. They're here. It is, it is 5:07, and unless I can't read the clock, that's a fact, right? There's something like, there is a mask in front of me, and that is a fact. But that's not a truth. That is not the truth. Truth is something bigger. To a poet, to someone who somehow takes a stab at the connection between the human and the other than human that is our condition in this world. Truth is the other than human. Truth is the whole that is more than the sum of the parts. And the facts can be the parts that we can add up, but the whole is bigger. And ultimately, it's not just bigger, it is the whole. So every single fact doesn't even compare. It's not even the same measuring stick. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Somewhat.
I somewhat agree.
If I can go next, I actually think that why there is a vast difference between the truth and the facts. I think truth is something that's obsolete. That the facts are invented really. The facts are open to interpretation. So we look at the clock. It's 5:07. Is it 5:07 a.m. or p.m.? Both true. The clock doesn't tell us. Is it 5 a.m. somewhere? Yeah. Is it 5 p.m.? And who invented the clock in the first place? How do we know that it's 5? Is it connected to the sun in some way? This is the fact. It's a fact because we decided it's a fact. We decided that we're going to go by this clock and at this time of the day because we moved the clock also by our decision. So we decided that it's 5 p.m. here, but a week ago at this time it wasn't 5 p.m. It was 6 p.m. So which one is the fact? They're both facts. They're both manufactured by us. And so that's why. But where does the time change? Really? No, it didn't. So the time remains the truth. The time itself didn't change. We changed the clock. We manipulated the clock. We manipulated the time. And they're both factual. So daytime is factual. Wintertime is whatever it's called. Daylight saving time, normal time. They're all facts. But and we take it as such. We live by it. But does it make it the truth? Did we actually change the time or did we manipulate it? I think that's what the difference is, because facts is open to manipulation by people, by humans, while truth really isn't. And then again, we can go into the whole discussion of what truth is, but the way I think if we just do it in comparison, facts and truth, I would treat truth as something obsolete, was where I started, and facts, that's something that could be manipulated and interpreted based on people, groups of people, countries, societies, but again.
Mm-hmm.
Does it somewhat make sense?
Somewhat.
So to put it in kind of the TOK language that we would probably use in TOK year 1 or 2, I think what you're saying is that the truth is objective, and it is just kind of the truth as opposed to facts which are subjective and can be
Correct.
manipulated. So
Yeah.
facts are contestable and the truth is not.
Yes, I think if I were to interpret the quote, that's how I would interpret it.
If I think about the difference between facts and truth, I actually somewhat think the opposite of what
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Koskowski thinks, because I think that when I think about the word fact in a sentence, I see it as a more cynical word. While when I think about truth, I actually realize that there might be a moral connotation in the word truth and in the concept of truth that we have. So while it is, while facts are something that we see and evaluate, truth is something that we strive for and we want to reach. And so if I had to say it now, I'd say that truth is the end of a journey, and facts are just tools that we use to reach this truth that actually is has a more of just a pragmatic importance to us, but has a very, very important ethical and moral meaning to it.
I mean, for me, when it comes to truth, it's really about how a culture might visualize it as, because like I feel like culture has this dualism in which people of different cultures, indeed, they may be having different things that they define as truths, as their own truth and as their own end of a path, while facts are just sets of conventions that help us develop. And yeah, so that's like my main point of view, and why I feel like there's this big difference. But an other thing I was thinking about is the concept of universal truth. What is the difference between a universal truth and a fact? So, and is it even achievable to have a universal truth as it is to what we define as having a fact? So, for example, if I say this desk, like the top of this desk is black, we all see it as black, but is it? Like, it might be defined differently by people who see it differently. Like, for example, if you have the concept of really dark blue and black, maybe someone might see this as that is factual, that it's dark blue or black. I don't know. I feel like it's not really defined, and yes, it might be a convention, so something that helps us simplify things to get to a point. While truth is, for me, is completely different from the point of view that is just our perspective on things and our final outcome. So yeah, that's my point of view on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was clear enough.
Somewhat.
If
I think, in a way, like, and as I think of this quote, and I think of what, and again, this is my thought, right? We're getting exactly that, like, what is true or what is a fact in this quote, and I'm not Maya Angelou, so I don't know what she meant. But to me, there's something like Alicia was saying, that the idea that, and ultimately, even without this like manipulation or agreement on like a fact, we can consider as something that is true, something that is verifiable, something that we can agree on, but truth transcends that, and to me, truth is personal. That doesn't make it any less true. It doesn't mean that it changes. But if I can make an example, a fact might be that my temperature right now is 98.7, and I can take a thermometer and check it, and I can do multiple things and sort of approximate, and we can agree that with a variance of 1 or 2 degrees, but that is a fact. The truth is my head hurts. And that is not a fact. That is the truth. And that is so much more personal and so much, and that is ultimately what is important to me. The fact is something that I can use to sort of explain to somebody, hey, I might have a fever, or whatever things have gotten, I haven't had enough to drink today. I didn't drink any water for the past 3 hours. I might be dehydrated. These are facts. The truth is my head hurts, and that's the only thing that matters to me. And that is personal, and bigger. Again, it's not the same measuring stick. I can't give you a measurement, but it is so much more important. And that is true for things like pain, and that is true for things like sentiment, whether it is love, whether it is hate, whether it is, like the things that don't have a paragon by which we can consider them facts. I don't have something that I can use to agree with you on how much, I love my dog, because that's not measurable, but it is a truth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Going with that point, I also felt like a connection with the topic of how language shapes us in the way of talking. Like when we start getting knowledge. So before that, we get things as the crude truth. So like. I don't think like, oh yeah, I see a microphone in front of me. I just feel it. I'm present, and that's the truth. That's uncontestable. That's what I feel. Well, when it comes to affect, it's just when it comes after language, when it comes after having limitations, and because of these limitations, I get conventions and that's how it develops. So I feel like, yeah, truth is a lot more personal. I agree with that one. Yeah.
If I had to, I really, really think that it's very interesting how Mr. V keeps repeating the fact that truth is something bigger, and it's something that is that goes over what's human, and to support that, I actually thought about a nice example in ancient Greece. They had a goddess for truth, and they had no god for facts, and I think that's pretty interesting. So the goddess of truth was named Aletheia, and so I looked up the Greek term for fact, and the Greek term for fact comes from a root that is the root of the verb to become, and I thought that was also interesting because truth has this goddess to represent it. Something that is a universal authority that you cannot contest. And then on the other side, fact is something that can become and keeps moving in time and keeps changing, because when you become, you change. So I thought that was an interesting linguistic difference, and maybe also cultural.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I agree with that completely, and I also think that it's again speaks to the fact that one, truth being something big, obsolete, something universal, objective, so to speak. In fact, and that could be interpreted obviously through language and through culture, because in different culture, truth is. So if you go to so in Indian culture, for example, because truth is what you want to hear. So truth is not mine. I mean, contrary to what you just described, but so truth would be if I'm talking to you and whatever I think your truth is, I'm going to tell you that. And if it's gonna change, my truth is gonna change along with it. Because culturally that's what, and so people, a same person could be saying two completely different things, saying they're both true, because that's what you want to hear. So I'm telling you the truth, and then you changed your mind. I'm telling you a different truth, and so culturally it's interesting, and they actually wholeheartedly believe that both things that they told you, they're both truth, because they speak to you, and so you're the source of truth in the word, which was very strange. It took me several years to understand that. And then once I understood that, it all made total sense. But so I think culturally we adjust. We have, of course, our own understanding that comes with our culture, with our language. I mean, I think most of us here speak several languages, and it's interesting how your connotation of any word changes when you change the language, because it seems the same word. You look up the definition in the dictionary and it translates from one language to the other, but does it really? Because it translates the meaning, but does it translate what it actually stands for? Because the word truth, I mean, that's a beautiful example with the goddess. And that just tells you everything you need to know. I think, again, in some languages, that truth carries a much more like heavier weight of significance than facts do.
Yeah.
And facts is something that you basically, yeah, it's something, truth is something aspirational, something bigger, while facts is something cut and dry and documented, like on whichever form, piece of paper or Excel sheet or whatever that is. But then again, I think that's why, as it sounds like an oxymoron, the fact that's supposed to be something that's beyond reproach, it's also very easily manipulated, because fact is created by a human. And that as easily as it was created, it could be recreated and manipulated and adjusted to whatever needs to be. I mean, I think it's the example of my home country, Belarus. Now there's people are being charged right, left, and center based on the facts. So the fact is that if you're standing on the street where some other person standing and protesting, therefore you are protesting. So that's the fact. You were there, that person is there, he's protesting, therefore you're protesting. So that's enough of a truth and a fact to put somebody in jail. It doesn't make, like in our society here, it wouldn't even make sense to anyone. But yet, again, the cultural interpretation and political interpretation come into play, same as language. So yeah.
I mean, if I thought about that, I thought more about an analogy as like truth being something that exists, and fact, kind of like, I don't know, the truth is the cave, and the facts are people who are
Digging.
digging into it, and trying to find what would be conceived and what would be uncontestable as what a universal truth would be, you know. But the thing is, as we see in scientific discoveries, a lot of what we discover is just on things we we start with a conclusion and then we try to give a motivation to it, even though the scientific method kind of tells you, no, this is not how you should do. But usually we tend to go with that direction. And so I feel like then it creates a new concept of many truths, in which people think that there are many types of truths, and you try to reach it, and then the facts kind of fail or go towards it. And like the facts in this case are just simplification of what reality is. And so I quite feel that the only difference between truth and a fact is, and it's kind of an oxymoron if you say so, is that truth is extremely simple, while fact, it's as like us humans try to get to a point, is extremely complex. And the fact is, like we're trying to get closer and closer to something that's simple, to something that's uncontestable, but we're still to a point in which it's so complex. And that's also what I observe when it comes to physics, chemistry, and biology. Because in biology you have to learn a ton of stuff because it's so complex. We have so many other things to discover and to go forward with. Well, when it comes to physics, yes, of course, we have a lot to discover of more, but we still, it's a lot more simplified than what it is with biology, and the things usually, and the things that we're basing ourselves on are just a lot more true to like the behaviors that are recorded actually function well in biology. It's kind of like more as a guess. I don't know. I kind of
Sorry, I think I can pose a question that I think will get us closer to what you're trying to say there, Bella. But before I do that, I wanted to recap a couple things. We started off very early on with a kind of definition of a world of difference. We didn't explore that too much because it seems like we mostly agree that that just means kind of as much of a difference as there could be. Though I think there probably are gradations in there. We can come back to that if you'd like. I also think a couple of us mentioned the kind of centrality of ethics perhaps to this quote, in that Angelou, who's someone associated somewhat with kind of ethical thought, she might associate truth with ethics as opposed to something else. But to go into the more TOK route, going off that last comment, if we take, for instance, an area of knowledge like natural science, and we look within natural science, how can we distinguish between facts and truth? Natural science seems like a subject that is mostly concerned with facts, and that they kind of held off on truth. Or is natural science trying to discover truth through facts? Are they connected or are they completely separate?
So if I can, off of what both Dr. Kuskowski and Isabella were saying, like I had a couple of thoughts that I can take into three different areas of knowledge, and one is language, and one is natural sciences, and one is mathematics. The one thought about what Dr. Kuskowski was saying about language and like the difference between truth and fact made me think about translation in poetry, where if you translate the facts, so you take the words and you translate them into the corresponding words of a different language, you have been factually correct, but you completely missed the truth because you don't have a poem, right? And if you're trying to translate a poem, then you have to write a poem and you have to take liberty. Calvino writes a beautiful essay about translating Queneau, the blue flowers that he translated. And I was like, this was impossible to translate because either you lose the meaning or you lose the literal translation. And ultimately the choice is you lose the literal translation because that might be a fact, but it is not the truth. So in that sense, to me, in language, we can have this example of, yes, there's a word of difference. Because a word, I can translate bread into pane for English and Italian, but they don't mean the same thing. They don't have the same resonance. And if this word were used in a poem, I would have to be very careful into saying, oh, that's what the word means, let's just translate. What is the actual meaning of that word, right? So to me that again, we can make that distinction. We can say, yes, there is a word of difference between a fact, a word, and its meaning, the truth. In natural science, similarly to what Isabella was saying, like there's a larger truth, which can be, if you want, the laws of nature that we're trying to figure out, and the facts are their manifestations or the experiments that we're doing, right? So if I drop a ball and I calculate the time, like I count how long it takes for this ball to go through space and time, I can calculate velocity, I can calculate acceleration for that one ball, that's a fact. Ultimately, if I do it 10,000 times, I see a pattern and I simplify that pattern until I arrive to an equation that describes the gravitational pull, and that's a truth. That is something that exists independently of me dropping something. Whether or not I do it, it's still there. And whether or not my calculations and whether or not I have a good stopwatch, however close I can get to it, every single instance of what I'm measuring, yes, it's a fact, but it's not it. It is a manifestation thereof. And in mathematics, actually very similarly, where 2 plus 2 in base 2 is 4, right? But that's a fact. But that's not a truth. The truth is that in any given system, addition works in a certain way. Y plus x is y plus 1 plus x minus 1, and I can go backwards on one side and forwards on the other until I have put those two together, and that's addition, and that's the truth. And that, it's true for 2 plus 2 and 5 plus 7 and 100,000 plus 75 and whatever numbers you want to put there. And those numbers are facts, but each of them is not the truth. The truth is this concept that is either revealed or discovered or created, however, like that's a bigger philosophical discussion on whether math is created or discovered. But each instance of where we use math is a fact, but none of them are the truth. The truth are these sort of universal laws that guarantee that we can have those facts ultimately. And again, to me, I had to qualify it, but in this scenario, I completely agree with this statement, because it is a world of difference.
I think if I had to reference an area of knowledge, it would be history at the moment. So I was thinking about whether there is a difference in the way we judge a fact and the way we judge the truth. And when I thought about the word judge, I thought about, and the IB history people will know this, when we have a source that presents facts, what we do is we do an OPCVL, which is we evaluate the values and limits of the facts that are being told in this source, with reference to origin, purpose, and content of the source. And this way, we actually evaluate the amount of truth that we can get from the facts that are being told, especially when we reference the content of the source. What does the source tell us? Which facts does the source tell us? Which facts does the source not tell us? And so, if I think about that, I actually am not sure if there is actually a world of difference between truth and facts, because perhaps there's a little bit of truth in every fact, and it should be filtered through evaluation. We judge facts to find the truth, and then do we judge the truth? Do we not? I think that depends on whether we see the truth as relative or not, or universal.
It's interesting. So I noticed as I was just listening to Alice speaking, but to all of us actually. So what we started was what we think of the quote, right? And so we had our opinions, and so mine, for example, was saying that it's a world of difference, really. But the more we discuss, the connection is there. It's really okay. So is it true to say that there is a world of difference? Because what we talked that the facts and the truths are interconnected one way or the other. And even if facts help to manipulate the truth exists in some universe, and we take facts. So facts have to be based on something. So as you were just saying, so basically, whether it's judging, whether it's evaluating, so we're connecting. So facts are based on something. They're not just pulled out of the thin air. Whether they represent the real truth of what we perceive as truth or not, that's a whole different story. But if we take the natural sciences as you referred to initially, so we have the different laws and different formulas and explanations of various processes that happening in nature, whichever science we take. So we, as Mr. V was relating to gravity, so you drop the ball and it falls. That just happens. And then so we can evaluate that and decide there's a velocity, there's a gravity, there's this, that, come up with the formula, how we calculate one or the other. So that becomes the fact. And so whether it's right or not, I don't know, somebody somewhere established that Newton said that this is the fact, and now we follow that because we take that as truth and we don't really question him anymore because he came up and we explained, came up with this formula, came up with the explanation. So the apple falls, that's truth, but also the fact. But then what we do with this and how we interpret it, that's a whole different story. We arrive to a formula that's actually man-made. That the formula didn't exist along with the apple falling. We came up with the formula. I mean, so I'm just kind of steering towards that mass as it discovered though. So that's a much bigger question, but same thing. So I think there is definitely a connectivity. It's the truth and facts are interconnected. Whether they're one and the same, I still maintain that they're not. And again, we talked about language, we talked about culture, we talked about history, and I think if you're on different side of history, you can interpret things differently, and they're both factual. So you take the Vietnam War, it's factual, right? Vietnam War, we call it Vietnam War. Vietnam War in Vietnam is not Vietnam War. That's not factual. That's not even true. But the war had happened, so they call it American War. And so that's factual too. So the truth is this one, the facts are different, and they're both factual in history books. They're judged, and they're evaluated, and they're sourced. So if you're a student in one country as opposed to the other, you learn things differently about the same event that took place. So does that represent the truth? So the truth somewhere in the ether that is the same, but taken apart by different facts and interpreted differently, because those things are man-made.
Yeah, I think that is interesting because at that point we think if the truth comes from the interpretation of facts, then maybe that would also represent an interesting cause for truth being so subjective. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what comes first. I don't know if the truth comes from interpretation of the facts or the other way around. Or maybe, I mean, it's hard to tell, but I just think what's clear is the connection between the two. But how they interconnected and what comes first.
To me, the connection doesn't necessarily mean, so having two things be connected doesn't mean that there also can't be a word of difference between them. So, but again, at the beginning I said I kind of need to qualify, it depends, because I can think of situations in which, that would not be the case. There wouldn't be any difference between a truth and a fact. So for example, in religion, when a truth is given, it is one and the same with a fact. The fact is the truth, and the truth is the fact, and that is a received truth. And of all truth, it is, if you want, the most absolute, the most untouchable, because it needs no proof. It is believed in. It's a leap of faith, right? I trust this. I believe this. This is the truth. And in that situation, because of the overwhelmedness, that's not a word, but I'm using it anyway, of this truth and all the facts that connect to it, the two things, like in a way, the facts scale up to the truth because everything is received and believed and unquestioned. It is no longer personal. It is sort of shared with all the people who share this belief, and it transcends the personal and human level, and thus becomes an untouchable truth. And the facts and the truth become one and the same. The same way that if you go into something where, like history, we can agree that we can, source some things, and we can say, okay, we're using different terms, but we're talking kind of about the same thing, but the different terms are in different languages, which kind of push us in different ways. But ultimately, there is an agreement of we'll never really have the truth, because we're not there, and we have to rely on even the people who were there have biases and have limited knowledge, and there isn't a way to know everything. So when the truth is flawed and we accept it as such, and it's okay for it to be flawed, it is enough, then again, facts get much closer to the building blocks of truth, right? Then, you know, I know all these facts, and these facts make a truth, and the two things are no longer so distinguishable. So to me, where the truth is either acceptable even if it's not perfect, or where the truth is so completely perfect that it is unquestionable, then truths and facts aren't so separated anymore. Personally, I don't think that's what Maya Angelou meant, and personally, when I think of truth, those are not I'm not a religious person, and I'm not a historian, right? So I do dabble into, I'm an artist, I dabble into personal a lot more, which is why if I had to choose, I would choose, I completely agree.
This makes me think about the vision of truth as an escalation of complexity, because as you see it, like there's I see it as universal truth, natural sciences, and humanities. As you go more forward, the more complex it goes. Like, as you may have noticed, like in natural sciences, there's physics, chemistry, and biology. In order, like physics in this case is the most general one, and which in fact has more laws in the matter of, yeah, if I do this, then it happens. Like, for example, gravity, always the same, and as long as now we haven't found something that misbelieves it. And then you have chemistry, and then you have biology. And if you see it as the studies of it, you see that physics studies, natural sciences studies different types of forces. So it studies weak interaction, strong interaction, force of gravity, and electromagnetic force. And so physics studies all four. Chemistry just studies electromagnetic force. Well, when it comes to biology, it's even a smaller branch. And as you see it, as you go into more complexity, as you go more into the specific, the more you are not sure of what it would be the outcome, and the more opinions you have. And humanities is that, like, it's even more complex, because truths are different. I visualize a fact in a completely different way that maybe Dr. V would watch it. And so I quite feel that the fact, like, being humans and being so complex kind of takes us away from what we were before getting the limitations. So, like, being in the state of like not having a mind. So, like, just getting the actual truth, and so something that's unquestionable. When we actually get these limitations, we start getting more complex, and having different points of view of what our universal truth would be. However, like, I quite feel that it's like, as I said before, as you go more forward, there's more interpretation. However, the more you go simpler, and the more you're close to a common point. And I feel like the common point is what for us would be the concept of truth, like universal truth, something that's unquestionable. Like, you cannot contest it. So that's my point of view.
I think it would actually be interesting to see it the opposite way, and to reason as if truth was something completely relative. So at that point, what I would think about is, well, but maybe truth is our way of judging facts. It's kind of our scale of value, and we judge how truly meaningful a fact is based on how truthful it is. So we give this automatic negative connotation to false facts, and we give this automatic positive connotation to true facts. And it's something that we all have, and it's so deeply rooted inside of us. So again, I would think of truth as an element of facts that makes facts more ethical, makes facts more authoritative. That's what I would think. Perhaps there is a giant difference if we on a linguistic spectrum when we say fact and truth, but when we get more conceptual, then maybe there isn't. Maybe they intertwine and they connect much more, and truth is just trait of a fact that we happen to see as better.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I mean, coming back to his point when it comes to American War and Vietnam War, in that point maybe you may be finding the people from different cultures disagreeing with, but then you go simpler and then you say, what is a war? And maybe at that point you start finding a common point. And by having this, and coming back to everything I said before, it kind of makes me feel like facts are just building blocks to a truth. Facts may be various in base of your point of view, in base of your perception, in base of your set of conventions, but it still builds up to the truth. So I don't view it as personal, I view it as universal.
But to this point, so we talked about, so facts could be false facts, right? So would false facts build up to the truth?
But in that point, what's false?
Well, yeah, that's exactly the point. So basically, if we look at one fact and judge it, right? Judge it whichever way, from whichever perspective, linguistically, culturally, everything was said. So you say it's a fact. I said, yeah, it's a fact, but it's a false fact. So for you, it's a step towards truth. For me, it's the opposite.
I feel like, I mean, I get that part in which things are contrasting with each other, but I feel like the contrast between the two, but then I go with another simpler question in which we both come and agree, it's like a step closer to a common point into what we feel like it's a truth. Because when it comes, also if you want to make an analogy again with natural sciences, when something it's not true, you fail. Like, for example, if I say, or at least, and you tried to do the experiment in many different ways, and in following the scientific method, you fail. So, for example, if I say, in this moment I'm fluctuating, that might have been, that might have been my truth, you know? But in that moment when I try it out, I'm not fluctuating, I'm just sitting, you know? And that's where the truth limitates what may be factual or not, if it makes sense.
I think so. I mean, to me, at least in the way that this quote is written, it's not so much a dissertation on how factual a fact is. And in common language, we say this, right? You know, this is a fact, and usually when we say, it's like when we say literally, most of the time that means figuratively, right? We use literally wrong the same way that we use fact in common language wrong. Like, you know, pineapple should never go on pizza, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a fact.
It is.
To me. And if there are any Canadians in this room, they might disagree, right? And that is where facts kind of are subjective, right? My interpretation. So to me, that goes towards a truth that is the truth of pizza, which is a very important truth. But to a Canadian who likes Hawaiian pizza, that is, it's the opposite, right? It's a false fact, but that's not really what I think we're really getting at with this quote and with this idea. I mean, to me, at least in the way that I'm trying to analyze this philosophical concept, ultimately, I'll take facts at their face, at their value. I'll take facts as things that we can agree are true. And if we have to simplify, then we'll simplify. We'll go away from things that have so much personal bias to them, right? So we'll stay away from politics, and we'll stay away from food, and we'll stay away from things that have that level of subjectivity that they cannot be considered facts.
Mm-hmm.
But we can find a number of things that are facts. And, we can look at it in different ways, but this mask is here. That is a fact. That is still not a truth.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, guys, I need to jump in. Can we get a round of applause, please, for our panelists? I think we did a great job of exploring the many different ways that you can look at this question. I think we have a few minutes left for some questions from the audience, if anybody has one.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to make a question or if I'm going to start making some commentaries, and maybe I'll find a question there at the end. A couple of things that I thought were really quite interesting is, as you started and you wrestled with that question in particular between truth and facts, you found yourself in that cloudy world of theory of knowledge, and at times I think you got close to some clarity, but even at the end, you should say, I kind of agree, I'm not sure. And there wasn't consensus, and I think there was even some contradiction with your own definitions, which is normal. This is what we do when we wrestle with those. But what I thought was quite interesting, and where I thought each of you in turn got much closer to clarity, and I thought your strongest was when you then went into those areas of knowledge and you started to use those specific examples. And of course, that's what the prompt is demanding that you do. When you started to talk about in art or in language or in science or in mathematics, the difference between those truth and facts, those rich examples brought it to life for, I think, a lot of us as we listened to it. And that's where I thought that's where that question begs us to rest, because I think that if you get caught in that never-ending debate between truth and facts, you could never escape from it. But I thought, whether you're talking about, and I think something that didn't get mentioned, which was, I think about it in art, for example, in particular in literature, a piece of fiction has the most beautiful truths that emerge from it, and this discussion of the sacredness of truth is so fantastic. And when you start to get into those discussions, I thought that was really rich and vibrant, but I think that it can be quite dangerous to rest too long in that little fine difference between truth and facts. We could debate that, and I have my definition of that, and Giovanni has his definition of that. That's absolutely fine as well. Just make sure that we quite closely define how we are going to define it in the purposes of our paper, truths and facts. And as long as we do that, I should do this because it gives us recording.
I guess I didn't talk about art, and I'm here as the art.
I know. It's like, come on.
Oh,
I was just dying for what does it mean in theater to have a truth?
Well, so I mean,
where there's no fact at all, right?
Well, no, I can tell you again. This idea of the sum of the parts and the whole being bigger. In theater, I can tell you that a fact is these are the lines I have to speak,
Exactly.
and a fact is my blocking tells me to get up and do a walk around the chair and then sit down again, and those are facts. But the truth is the play in its entirety as it is performed in front of an audience, and nothing else is the truth. All those are facts. In painting, a brush stroke is a fact. If I mix yellow and red in tempera, I will get orange. But that is a fact. But the truth is, when Van Gogh uses that orange to paint sunflowers, they're sunflowers. You know what I mean? And they're so much more than that on top of it. They mean something, and that is the truth behind them, which is so much more than the sum of the brush strokes and the pigment and you know the light that shines on that piece of canvas.
And yet the truth of any particular piece of artwork, kind of going back to Alice's point, can be somewhat subjective to the artist.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
And to the beholder.
Yeah.
Like, and the truth of that piece of art is not the same truth to anyone who's looking at Van Gogh's Sunflowers, to anyone who's going to see a production of Hamlet, to anybody who's listening to a piece of music by Bach or by Pere Ubu.
and coming back to Mr. Hitchcock's point, I think that the strongest TOK essays are often the ones that play with those definitions as much as possible and say, like,
Yeah.
we could assume that Angelou is arguing that truth is objective and ethical and true, and that the facts are mundane and less important. But that may not be what she's saying. And in the context of natural science, we have to play with different definitions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if you guys know this, I taught TOK for 20 years, so I have a little bit of experience with this. One of the things that I would talk about with facts is, we can choose different definitions, but facts are provable as true or false. They may be false facts, they may be true, but we can prove them one or the other. That's one definition we might use for a fact. At
So
the end of the day,
pineapple
they're
should
not-
never go on pizza, that's a fact.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So
I feel like that's more of a
So,
It's more of a
but
truth.
the facts ultimately aren't that interesting. We don't spend a lot of time on the facts. We spend much more time on what we do with those facts. The facts are important building blocks for knowledge, no matter how you slice it. But it's what we do with those facts that we can use to form truth.
And if I can say something about that, I think it's interesting how you use the term to do, because I'm obsessed with language. Actually, another way of saying fact in Greek is pragma, which happens to have the same root as pragmatic, which is to do. So you use a fact to do something in the empirical world, to do something that is concrete and that is tangible. While the truth, maybe you use it to do something on a more logical level, on a more conceptual level, and I think that's interesting.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? We're just about out of time, but I'd love to hear one more.
I just wanted to clarify again, like, because if we take those terms like true fact and false fact,
Sure.
I just wanted to ask for an example of a false fact and true fact, rather than, because what I got from the discussion is that we observe facts as empirical objects, and then we find it false or true. And I think I just maybe.
Well, I think it depends. So I think Mr. Kuskowski and all of you at some point defined those, and you did it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I think, like Giovanni said, I'm going to define this as a fact is something that we take and that we accept as true. That full stop, you can stop there and go on with your paper. Whereas Vladimir said, well, there's facts that, okay, it's a fact that it's 6 o'clock, but we don't know if it's AM or PM. So those there, and then there are. So it depends on how you work on that definition of the different fact that is possible. Giovanni talked about in an experiment that we have facts. The fact I conduct an experiment, and I maybe have to do that 10,000 or 100,000 times before something else emerges from that. Each of those, there are a number of facts that emerge from that experiment, right? But then what happens, Feynman would say, when we get that one experiment that doesn't agree with the previous ones, we have to go back. We got or we have to see if maybe we got a false fact in there. There was something that got into the experiment to screw with the data, and so we'd have to explore that, or if not, we have to go back to the drawing board.
But I think by definition, Matvey, what you said, I think if we start defining the fact as true and false, that's where that subjectivity comes in. Because that's, for sure, if I say this is the fact, I'm not going to say, well, this is a false fact, unless there is some, underlying reason for that. But I say, well, that's a fact. That's a fact. That's true fact. Well, so Isabella here can look at this and says, I think that's false fact. Take the pizza example. So I think the pineapple on pizza, that's a fact. That's true. I mean, and so our Italian friends think this is nuts. That just doesn't happen in our world. So that's false fact. that binary will
Well,
never go
so
with it.
to me, that's a belief, not a fact, though. Like, we're talking about beliefs, not facts.
Yeah, but for me, in this case, like, if you're talking about belief, then like, no, I mean, you put it as belief, but in reality, when it comes to fact, as we have referred it,
Mm-hmm.
and it until as now, for example, we said, I don't know about gravity force, but what are we basing ourselves on? Those are just like a set of conventions which a community trusts. But if you use other ones, they might disagree on that because they might have like a different. I mean, in this case, like even though you have, like no, in that case, both would find a way, a different way of saying the same thing.
But that's exactly right. I think you just said that. So basically, the true fact or false fact, it's subjective to a community, to a group of people, to a culture, to a language, to something. So which is true fact for one group of people is a false fact for another group of people. So there is no such definition that defines a fact as a false or true, because it could be one and the same.
Yeah.
So
Really quick, Artem, we have one more question. I think we're gonna have to close out after that because with the time change, I don't know about you guys, but I wanna go to dinner real quick.
Yeah, going to the question, Miss Angelou is like putting the words, there is a world of difference between truth and facts. And if you think about truth and facts as like two separate worlds which like have some things in common, it made me like, this is my truth of this question, and it made me think that maybe like truth and facts are like so similar and so different at the same time, but maybe like the truth is probably for sure, as like many people will agree, is your self-perception, and fact is something unarguable. Like, and by saying the false fact, it's kind of, I don't understand like those words together, how do they work, because like the fact is probably something what can be like unproved by someone, but I think everybody will like at some point have different position about like any fact, and it leads me to the idea that maybe the facts do not exist like as a fact as our understanding of this world in general, and the facts is just like some interpretation of the truth, which is being the truth for the most of the individuals.
I mean, I think some of the things that we have been sort of going around, and in part what you're saying now is this idea of approximation, of there isn't like a, and you know, this is true in science, in natural sciences. This is true in interactions. This is true almost in like. In any way where you're trying to look at a fact, you are going to either have a set of rules that is sort of pre-established as this is how we're going to look at things, right? You know, if I'm saying that I am not moving, well, that's because I'm using this room as my universe, right? If I'm looking at the fact that the Earth is spinning on itself and hurling around the sun and in a galaxy, we're moving. I'm moving even if I stay perfectly still, right? So it depends on what set of pre-understood and pre-shared sort of references, like what is my reference set, right? So in that, you know, if I say that this table is 3 feet by 7 feet, well, yes, if I take a ruler, but if I measure it with a laser something, I'll probably find that it's an approximation. It's 3 feet and a tenth of a hundredth of an inch, right? So it's not precisely that, but that's my reference is give or take, you know, an eighth of an inch, and that's good. That's a good frame of reference, right? So approximation and variability of my frame of reference gives me this different possibilities of facts that can lead to the same truth, because ultimately the truth is the bigger thing, and the facts get to it. The idea of false facts, I think that's a phrase that has come into our common speech after certain political happenings and alternative facts of a couple of years ago. But to me, like, the definition of fact is something that it's true, that it can be arguably, like, that it can be proven this is true or not true. If it's true, it's a fact, right? To me, so there isn't a false fact. There isn't a false fact is something that is wrong. It demonstrably not a thing, right? There are 5 balls on this table. That's not a fact. That is a false fact. There's no balls. There's only a mask and some hands, right? So that.
And so when I say it's provable as true or false, that's what I mean, in
Right.
the sense that it's provable as true or false. And if it's not, it is a false fact in the sense that
It's not a fact, because basically logically, in logical, in math and computable logic, a false fact and a non-fact are the same thing. You
Yeah.
just put the same
Yes.
symbol behind
Yes,
it. You're
yes.
like, not true. Move on.
I think this is probably a good time for us to disband. Again, another round of applause, please. Everyone did a great job.